Hello and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, with a question for you. That's right, you, my beloved audience. I want you to answer this for me. What do you think they're doing with your DNA? You know that 23andMe swab you sent off for the holidays and you were so excited to open up that envelope and find out who you were. And it's not like you sent off a piece of your identity that somebody could use for identity theft, like stealing your passwords or credit card numbers, but really, who would be interested in your DNA? Well, let me assure you that there's someone who's interested in your DNA, and you don't want that someone to be interested in your DNA, and that's Satan himself. Why would Satan be interested in your DNA? Well, there's a Y chromosome marker to determine whether or not you are in the line of Aaron. That's right, Aaron of the Bible. And it's going to be a descendant in the bloodline of Aaron that's going to reform the Sanhedrin that's going to call for the return of Jesus. So if there was a way to weaponize that DNA and take out the whole line of Aaron and destroy that lineage, then Satan becomes the prince of this earth forever. And Jesus doesn't come back. That is the story behind the best-selling biblical thriller, The Codist, now available in second edition for you at just $2.99 on Kindle and also available in paperback. Visit Amazon.com today and get your copy of this best-selling biblical thriller. Also want to encourage you to visit our website, ignitinganation.com. Click on the special offers, and you can see the cover of my latest book, The 7 Laws of Abundant Living, Lessons Learned from the Tree of Life. I want you to click on that book cover. We're going to ask for your email. We're not going to send you spam, because spam is not kosher, but we will send you the first chapter of this book. It takes you on a journey from the natural into the supernatural of 7 specific areas of that tree, beginning with the ground and all the way out to the fruit, that God reveals supernatural truths. It's an extraordinary journey, a great Bible study, and being used in women's penitentiaries all over the country, and great for Bible studies in small group. Get your copy today wherever Christian books are sold. It's my pleasure to welcome our guest to the show today, Johnny Baker, author of The Road to Freedom, Healing from Your Hurts, Hang-Ups, and Habits. He's been on staff at Celebrate Recovery since 2004 and has been the pastor of Celebrate Recovery at Saddleback Church since 2012. As an adult child of an alcoholic who chose to become an alcoholic himself, Johnny is passionate about breaking the cycle of dysfunction in his family and helping other families find the tools that will lead to healing and openness. He knows that because of Jesus Christ and by continuing to stay active in Celebrate Recovery, Maggie, Chloe, and Jimmy, his 3 children, will never see him drink. Johnny's a nationally recognized speaker, trainer, and the teacher of Celebrate Recovery. He's the co-author of the Celebrate Recovery Daily Devotional, Celebration Place, and The Landing as an associate editor of the Celebrate Recovery Study Bible. He's been married since 2000 to his wife Jenny, who serves alongside him in Celebrate Recovery. You can contact them at celebraterecovery.com. Johnny Baker, welcome to Revealing the Truth.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here today.
Well, this is such a great story, such a great piece, and I want to first thank you for your transparency. And then I want to ask you a question. What the heck were you thinking?
Yeah, I think that's a question I get a lot. Like, how did I go down the same path that my dad went down with, as you read, somebody who was raised by an alcoholic who chose to become an alcoholic himself? And I've given that a lot of thinking since I started recovery. And I think a lot of it came from this idea that I thought that just because my dad couldn't handle it didn't mean that I wouldn't be able to handle it, that I would figure out how to do it right, and that I could enjoy a drink now and then, and that I wouldn't fall to the same compulsions and addictions that he did. And I was wrong, and I kind of outdid him in every way possible when it came to that, and in a much shorter time hit a bottom pretty hard. And so thank God I had some experience with Celebrate Recovery from my teenage years after my parents had started the ministry, and knew where to go when it was time for me to get healing for my alcoholism.
Johnny, there's a spiritual law that Dr. John Trent actually was the one who introduced me to it. It was called the law of drift.
Okay.
And that if we chart a course from point A to point B, and our course happens to be just 2 degrees off at the start, it will not be noticeable in the first mile or the first 10 miles or even the first 1,000 miles. But in a journey from Earth to the moon, you would miss the moon by 92,000 miles.
Wow.
And it is a law of drift. And if we don't adjust our course, when we begin to go off course, we can tend to wind up in a place that we did not intend to wind up. And it sounds to me like this is exactly what happened to you, is that you began to drift. And the more you drifted, the further away you got.
Yeah, I think that's true. I was raised in the church. I started attending church as a preschool kid, and had a relationship with Jesus really early on. And when I got to high school, I was still involved in ministry, and it wasn't until later on that I think you're right, that drift became more and more apparent. And I think that's something of what recovery does, is it helps you correct your course and get you back on track.
You are sharing a very transparent story with the world, and when you do that, you are celebrating recovery. This is your watershed moment, if you will, of I really am going to go public and celebrate recovery. But I first have to take you to the genesis of this journey. And sure, that's where I have to start, because it seems like a hit in the forehead of you had every example along the way, but it doesn't matter. That's not what sets the course of our life. Right. That we have to own the decisions that we make. Right. And you address that in the book about this kind of ownership. Your journey and who you are so indelibly woven into the fabric of your life, and who your father was and is woven into the fabric of your life, that it was almost too easy. It was almost too easy to pick you off. It was going to the fair and seeing the ducks, and plink, I can pick this one off, and plink, it was just almost too easy. It was the perfect setup where it was almost as if you had to go down this path not by divine design, but by the fact that you couldn't ever get where God wanted you to go unless you went through the fire and you were refined by the fire. And what I think of Genesis 50, verse 16, where Joseph is talking to his brothers and said, what you meant for evil, God worked for his good so that many would be saved. 3.9 million people in over 29,000 churches all over the world are participating in Celebrate Recovery.
Right.
And if this story was theoretical, if it was hypothetical, if it was riding on your dad's coattails, hey, he's just the boss's kid, what does he know about life? He certainly waxes eloquently about what his dad did, right. But what does this little punk know?
You sound like a lot of people who, when I first came around, so yeah, I'm used to those. No, I think you're right. I think that there are some, I talk about this in the book, that pain has a purpose. And I think when we're going through hard times, it's really hard for us to know why we're going through the tough times. And we don't always get to see it during, or maybe we never even really get to know. But I do think that one of the reasons I was allowed to make those choices I made and to go the way that I went was because God had a plan. And I think he, like you said, I don't believe that God designed for me to go that way and to do those things, but I think he allowed me to so that he could use it later on. And, I think that is something that having my own story and going through my own recovery is really important. I do want to point out, though, that Celebrate Recovery isn't just for drug addicts and alcoholics. It's important that it is, but it's for anybody with what we call a hurt, a hang-up, or a habit. And so that means all of us can benefit from what is essentially a sanctification process or discipleship process like Celebrate Recovery, where it helps us go from one place to another. And so while I definitely did go out and repeat some of those mistakes and become an alcoholic myself, there's other people who serve in Celebrate Recovery who have never gone down those roads. And it's but yes, I agree. I think that there is a contingent inside Celebrate Recovery, certainly, that had I not had my own story, would never have accepted me. And not that I do it for them, but I think that it is definitely a part of it for sure.
You know, it's interesting you say that. My executive producer and I were talking about a previous guest who went through abuse, an abusive relationship, wound up getting her PhD in psychology to become a counselor to deal with people who have survived abuse. And we were just discussing resources that are available to somebody that's gone through abuse. And Celebrate Recovery is that kind of program that's available. We tend to pigeonhole it, and you are exactly correct, as drug and alcohol recovery. Because we think that those are what you have to recover from.
Right.
But life can be pretty harsh for a lot of people, and the thought of going to a counselor is anathema to a lot of men.
It is.
You know, honey, I think you should see a counselor. Yeah, well, I think you need to see one too. And, you know, that's the whole dialogue. But this is kind of a much different environment. It's not, and I don't want to present this as group therapy. This is a life step at a time journey to being who God designed you to be.
100%.
But the first part is figuring out that God does have a design for you.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, you're right. A lot of people do resist getting help that they need, whether it's counseling or recovery or any of those things. And it's a shame because so much help can be offered. And, you know, like you were talking about with your previous guests with abuse, there are groups for men and women in Celebrate Recovery who are survivors or who have experienced sexual, physical, or emotional abuse. And it's actually one of our most thriving, growing groups. But we have groups from all different kinds of life. And it's not group therapy. It's a time where we get together and we just share openly. And there's some guidelines that kind of facilitate how we share. But no one's there to fix or judge or give input, actually. It's actually a place where I can just kind of come and talk openly. But the reality of it is that until we admit we have a problem, we can't get any help. And so much of it is admitting this is a problem in my life and I need help. And to your point earlier, you know, what caused my parents' separation was my mom said, go get counseling with me or get out. And my dad got out and he was gone for 13 months. And that began part of his recovery journey. It actually is where he took recovery seriously, is during that time. But there are a lot of people who resist getting the help that they need. And, you know, to anybody who's a part of this conversation today, I would encourage you to check out any kind of help, whether it's counseling, one-on-one, couples counseling, recovery ministry, anything like that to help with whatever you're struggling with.
You know, a lot of it has to do with pride. Back in 1980, I spent 2 years homeless.
Okay.
It was I owned a tractor trailer parts manufacturing business. Carter got in the White House. Interest rates went to 18%. Small businesses were crashing all over the place. I was too embarrassed to call my family and tell them. I had a friend that drove for a limousine company, so I got a job driving a limousine. You got to keep the car. I slept in the best hotels. I made homeless look good. I had a suit on. I'd pick people up at the airport. I'd get big tips. It was really kind of a subculture, but I didn't speak to my family for 2 years because I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed that the business failed. I was embarrassed that I had lost everything and just only cared about being embarrassed. And that's exactly kind of a place where people find themselves, is they don't reach out because they're embarrassed.
Yeah.
You had an experience where you had to pick up the phone and call your own father.
I did, yeah.
Take us to that, a little bit of that journey. I don't want to taint, if you will, the story, and I don't want people not to buy the book because I want them to get the full embrace of it. But I think this is important when we come to a crossroads, what God is calling us to do, and how you had to get to that point and what that call was like for you.
Yeah, in December of 1999, I was arrested for a DUI, and I went to jail. And that night, I was given the opportunity to make one phone call, and I called my dad. And it was about 3:30 in the morning, really close to Christmas. And the interesting thing was the way that the jail had the phone call. It was a payphone, if you remember payphones, and it didn't have a receiver on it, and it was about chest high. And so it was late at night, obviously, and so the call was answered, and I ended up having to get on my knees to speak into this phone because of the height of the where the receiver was. And so just a good picture for me of calling my father on my knees. But I wasn't just calling my dad, I was calling the founder and pastor of Celebrate Recovery. And so there was a lot of shame and embarrassment in that. But he's such a loving dad. He said, hey, look, you made some mistakes and I'll get you out when I can. And when he picked me up the next day, he said, you need to take a look at your actions. But he didn't lecture me. He didn't yell at me. He didn't demand that I change because he knew those things wouldn't help. And it was about 4 years later that I came back to Celebrate Recovery to work on my alcoholism issues. And I'm convinced that part of the reason why I was able to go back to him for that was the way that he responded to that situation.
Now, you got married in 2000, so you were still 4 years of dealing with now bringing it into a marriage.
Yes.
It's one thing to be quote unquote self-destructive or have self-destructive behaviors. It's another thing to involve somebody else into, psychiatrists call it a folie à deux, a fantasy shared by two.
Okay.
What was Jenny? Were you hiding it from her, or was she?
I was, yeah. Jenny, her thing has always been that alcohol is a sign of out of control behavior, not just drunkenness, but just even just a little bit of alcohol. And so she always hated it when I drank. And so what I learned was to hide it from her. We worked opposite schedules. I was working in a restaurant at the time, and she was working at an office at a doctor's office. And so I worked mostly nights and she worked mostly days. And so we kind of did that crisscross thing a lot. And so we had a 2-bedroom condo at the time, and we didn't have any kids yet. And so I would drink in the second bedroom and hide it from her. And it really did. It put a wedge in between us. And you talk about that drift principle. What started off as kind of a small thing began to separate us more and more. I didn't know this until she had gone through recovery herself, was that she was afraid to confront me on my drinking because she was afraid I would leave her. And I was afraid to be honest about my drinking because I was afraid she would leave me. And so we had this fear in our marriage. We had this wedge of my lying and my hiding and isolating from her in our marriage. And it wasn't until she became pregnant with our oldest daughter that I went, I don't want to do this. I don't want to bring this into my relationship and into my kids to watch me drink the way I watched my dad drink. And he wasn't an abusive alcoholic at all. He was just unavailable. And I didn't want that to happen in my family either. And it was at the very beginning of her pregnancy, but I thought, okay, this is my time. This is when I really have to make a change. And that's when I came back to recovery.
So the process of returning to recovery, the call to your dad was calling the guy that founded Celebrate Recovery. And he applied his own principles to his own son, which tells you how convicted he was of the program that he developed. It could not be confrontational, it could not be condemning, that you can't make somebody want to get well, you can't make somebody want to heal, you can't make somebody want to forgive, you can't make anybody do anything. It's got to be them and the Lord. And he did what is truly the greatest act of love, and that he handed you over to the master of heaven and earth. Right. I actually tell people that have betrayed me and hurt me that I'm about to do the worst thing that can ever happen to you. Yeah. And they're thinking, I'm going to murder them, I'm going to burn their house down, I'm going to wash my hands of you, I am going to release you into the hands of my loving Father and say, Lord, bless that sorry sucker if you can, okay? I'm out of here, and I don't turn back. And Will tell you that there have been people in my life that have betrayed me, but because I've done that, it's not that I will tell you that I used to love the passage of Scripture says that feed your enemy. It's like heaping hot coals on their head. Right? So I would invite a lot of people to lunch because I actually wanted to see it, but that's just between you and I, not for the whole audience. But
yeah, right.
Except that we're live. But it's true, as we look at the application of Scripture and we begin to think about our own hearts and examine our own selves, and it becomes a matter of heart and not a matter of logic. The reasoning here is tied to our soul. Our real thinking is a matter of heart, and that's what God really wants from us, is our heart. So when you return to Celebrate Recovery, what was that like for you?
I mean, I'm still in Celebrate Recovery,
yes,
to this day. And so, but yeah, when I came back, it was to really dig into my alcoholism issues. So I'd worked on some issues earlier as a teenager on codependency or being a child of an alcoholic, and applied the principles to my life that way. So I had this basis of this foundation of what recovery was going to be for me. And so it was when I came back that I came into the men's alcoholism group and the chemical dependency group, and began what we call a step study, which is working through these workbooks that really help us go step by step. So it's not just sort of this ambiguous idea of, well, I think I'm on step 1 now, or maybe I'm on step 5. No, I'm working through them step by step. And I've done that process many times and worked on many different issues as well. But yeah, I'm in program for the long haul.
So this is a process of healing, not being healed.
Yes. Yeah. And, I mean, I think there are some people that have prayed for God to take away a compulsion to use or to do a certain thing, and God has done it in a snap like that. That wasn't how it happened for me. I would pray at night as the room spun around me, saying, God, please help me not do this again. But then I woke up to me every day, and I had to make that choice at the end of the day. Where other people have said, God, help me never do this again. And man, it's thank God it's gone away. But I talk about this in the book, what a lot of people fail to realize is, even if that's true, there's a wake of pain that they've caused behind them. And there are people in their lives who would really benefit from some of the things we do in recovery. Watching that person go through recovery for their own issues can help other people who have been hurt by your actions. And it can also help you understand more about why you did the thing. Because a lot of times, too, what happens is somebody comes to recovery and they deal with the symptom of their pain: alcohol, pornography, spending, eating, not eating, whatever that thing is. But they don't deal with that root cause of pain that lies inside of us that causes us to do those things. But what recovery can do, especially somebody who's in recovery and attending counseling, things like that, can really help you get to that root cause that causes somebody to act out. And then when you deal and you face with that, there's no more looking for an escape, because you've dealt with the truth.
You make some fabulous points. We're talking with Johnny Baker, author of the newly released book, The Road to Freedom, Healing from Your Hurts, Hang-Ups, and Habits. When we come back, we're going to talk about this concept of normal, which is bizarre in every aspect of it. As if God does not create each and one of us uniquely, that there is some cookie cutter, that we all look like the same gingerbread man and we're all made the same way. So we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Johnny Baker, author of the newly released book, The Road to Freedom, Healing from Your Hurts, Hang-Ups, and Habits. We'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and we're talking with Johnny Baker, author of The Road to Freedom, Healing from Your Hurts, Hang-Ups, and Habits. Johnny, welcome back to the program.
So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, Johnny, we spent the first segment talking about Celebrate Recovery, this ministry that your father founded, the one you found yourself in need of, the one that you found yourself continuing to be in need of, but you also facilitate and direct and lead and guide others in this journey. And it's through that leading, guiding, and directing that you also are being led, guided, and directed. It's the perfect combination of serving and being served, of this servant leadership. The whole model is that you lead by serving, and therefore you are also in the receiving side of the servant, the giver and the receiver, all perfectly combined into one. Before we went to break, I threw out a word. It's a very weird word in God's economy, because all of us have different DNA. All of us have different fingerprints. all of us have different pupils of our eyes. We have unique features and unique gifting, and no two people are identical, but yet we have this term normal.
Right.
What is that?
So in the context of what I'm talking about in the Road to Freedom is normal is what a lot of people in America specifically are really going for. I'm okay. Everything is fine. Don't bother looking too close because I'm okay. And there's nothing in my life that needs to be dealt with. Normal means that I pretend I have it all together. There's a saying in recovery that I'm one of those people. So in the beginning of Celebrate Recovery, my parents would go to different conferences and talk about Celebrate Recovery, and well-meaning pastors would come up to them and they'd say, I'm so sorry you went through that, but we just don't have those kinds of people in my church. And they'd kind of look at each other and say, well, thanks for coming to the workshop. Now, thank God all these years later that stigma has been broken. But there still is this idea that, as we talked about earlier, those people who go to counseling, those people who go to therapy sessions, those people who in recovery, those poor people who really need our prayer and our support. The rest of us, normal people, are doing just fine. Thank you very much. But to your point, all of us are broken. The Bible says we've all sinned and we fall short of the glory of God, which means we've all been hurt by other people and their sin, and our sin has hurt ourselves and other people. It means there really isn't anybody normal. But this idea that I'm fine, thank you very much, I'm not going to talk about my problems, you go ahead and do it, but I'm okay. And I think that's really the heart of that.
You know, you break the book down into life lessons.
Mm-hmm.
And the first lesson is one that I think the strongest thing I ever did in my life was go to counseling. I went to a counselor who was a pastor that specialized in pastoral betrayals, either the betrayal by your spouse or congregation or somebody in your board or leadership. In my case, it was my spouse.
Okay.
And he specialized in pastors, ministers who had congregations who had gone through betrayal. And I didn't really have a reluctance to go, but being able to say the words, listen, the rug's been pulled out from under my life and it hurt. I felt stronger in that profession of pain than I think I might have ever felt in any moment where the world might say, well, you know, you were weak because you needed help.
Right.
That's a misperception, misconception, and misnomer in itself, and that's your life lesson number one. Admitting you have a problem doesn't make you weak.
Right. In fact, it reveals that you're strong enough to do something about the problem that you have. And it's the beginning of healing, like you found with your counselor, and many of us have found in either counseling or recovery or therapy, that it's that first necessary step. The first principle of Celebrate Recovery is realize I'm not God. I admit that my life is unmanageable. And so we just look at our life and say, it's not what I'm pretending it is. It's not what I'm denying it is. It's real. And so I need to seek help. And it's there that we're able to begin this journey, to begin the healing process. But admitting you have a problem is actually a sign of strength. And I talk about this with my kids. I talk about this with people in our congregation and with people in Celebrate Recovery all the time. Hey, when you say I need help, you exchange your power for God's power. And who's got more of it? Obviously, God does. And I'd rather have his power in my life than try to run on my own battery.
You know, it's so interesting that the picture that's behind you is of lightsabers.
Yes.
it's certainly a picture of characters, and we see what we want to see, but we are to be this light. Jesus says that, well, I'm in the world, I'm the light of the world, but now you're the light of the world. Let your light so shine that it would bring glory. The man would see your good works and bring glory to your Father in heaven.
Right.
Years ago, I moved to Atlanta and befriended a man who I knew was an alcoholic. He slept in his office. You could open the door only halfway till it hit the couch. You had to slide in behind the door, close the door, and years later I had moved off to California in another position. I came back to Atlanta and I reached out to him because he was somebody that in his sober time, he was a very smart, very knowledgeable man in the business. And I called him and he said, yes, listen, I always remembered you. You were a friend to me. Come by my office and we'll talk about what you're going to do now that you've returned to Atlanta. And so he gave me the address, and I didn't recognize the address, but I've been gone for 7 years, so I'm sure he had moved. And I get to this building, and it's like 7 stories. It's all stainless and glass and beautiful, and his name is on the building. And I go up to his office, and I say, listen, this is gorgeous, with the overview of the skyline of Atlanta, and it's just amazing. I'm going, did you win the lottery? What happened to you? He said, no, I found the Lord, and I reconciled my marriage, and I quit drinking, and I joined a program. I was thinking it was AA, but it wasn't. It was Celebrate Recovery, and my life has turned around, and now all the potential that I had in my life is coming to be fulfilled. It was always there. It was just dusty, dirty, put up on the shelf and neglected because I didn't recognize the gift that God had created in me. I only saw what my father told me, which was, I'll never amount to anything, and that tape played over and over and over and over. And I watched this transformation of this man, and here's what he said to me. He said, listen, I'm going to give you a job, I'm going to pay you, I'm going to teach you this business, and after 6 months, if you decide you want to leave and hang up your own shingle, I'm going to release you with all the intellectual property that you want to take, with whatever customers that you think that you would want to have, whatever kind of business that you want to create from this, I will give it to you as a blessing to you, my friend, with one requirement, and that's that you come to Wednesday morning Bible study at 7 a.m. I said, sure, I'd be happy to. And that was one of the seeds planted in my journey. I didn't come to the Lord till many years later, but that was one of the seeds along the journey of being the one Jewish guy in the company. And he did exactly that. In 6 months, I said, I'm going to go out and hang my own shingle. He said, bless you. He gave me a bonus and said, listen, get good business cards, get good letterhead, get good printers, get good stationery, get good, I'm going to make it. And this was his gift to me because I had seen the transformation in his life. And see, today I'm still telling the story in my own testimony about somebody who came out of Celebrate Recovery that I saw their life completely transformed right in front of my very eyes. So
that's amazing.
You, in your story about your relationship with your wife, you both were making decisions out of fear. And one of the things that I know that you espouse and that you promote is that any decision made out of fear is not of the Lord.
Right.
And
yeah, and I think, definitely we were both afraid of basically the same thing. And I think that some of the things that we were raised with and that we brought into our marriage, and it was through a recovery process for both of us where we were able to see those things clearly and deal with some of those fears. And then we're able to say, okay, God, help us move from fear to love, and help us move from this idea of, that this person's going anywhere, to that we're going to fight for everything together, and we're going to fight through everything together in the whole deal, that neither of us is going anywhere. That allowed us to have a healthier marriage that is where it's at now. But definitely, I think so many of us make decisions out of fear. We talked about pride a little bit earlier. I think the other side of that is fear. Fear is something that keeps us from making changes that we need to make. And my dad has always said that nobody changes until the fear of change is exceeded by the pain they're going through in their life. And as God turns up the pain in their life, all of a sudden the fear of change, what am I going to be if I change, or what's going to happen if I don't have this thing, that becomes less and less as the pain gets higher and higher, and we look for a way to help us with our pain. And that, for many of us, is what we've learned, is to turn to God, and he is able to help us more than anybody else, more than anything else.
The principles of these life lessons are actually confirmed by world-renowned psychologist Dr. John Trent, who, your life lesson 3, small steady improvement lasts longer than overnight change. Replacing good habits with bad habits. They're both behavioral. So living a life habit-free There are positive habits.
Mm-hmm.
Habitually reading your Bible,
Right.
daily devotionals, going to church,
Right.
being accountable. Those are good habits to develop. So the concept of habits or behavioral changes, slow steps. There was a movie you might remember with her name just slipped my mind. Jodie Foster,
Mm-hmm.
where her dad, when she was a little kid, she'd sit on his lap and he would operate a ham radio.
Okay.
And every time she would turn the dial, she'd turn it too fast. And he would say, small steps, Ellie, small steps, small
Mm-hmm.
steps. That way we used to fine tune the radio in the car. Fine tune with small steps. And this is a journey of small steps,
Right.
not a journey of radical change.
Right.
And you say in the book that that's what endures.
That's actual change, and it's long lasting change. And what many of us want is overnight microwave change. And what I've learned is recovery is more like a slow cooker. It's like a crock pot. It takes some time, but that change is actually going to last a long time. Now, again, I said there are some people who they pray for compulsion to lift and it's changed. And I'm not discounting that happens. But I think for many of us, what we really need is that small incremental change. And I'll tell you, for the people in our lives who are watching us, a lot of people say, how long is it going to be until people accept that I'm changing? Well, as they see the slow progressive change, they actually begin to accept that you're changing, because it's not this grand gesture of I'm different now, it's all better. But instead, man, he just said he was sorry to me about being late. He's never said sorry for being late our entire marriage. What's that about? That's a small change. And that guy he just got caught up in traffic and waved with all five fingers instead of one. Now, what's that about? That's change. And those are those things that we want to celebrate that are happening and also count on, because like I say, those are the changes that they kind of stack up and they're long lasting, and they're measurable, and it's a change that actually it's gonna take you to the next thing. And when you mention habits, I always wonder why it's so easy to break a good habit and so hard to break a bad one. To me, that's always the thing. I think, it's so easy to not eat healthy today, but it's so hard, to break the bad habits of eating. And it's so easy. And so I think those are things that are all part of this growth process. And it's why I say I'm a lifer in Celebrate Recovery, because just when I think I've got it figured out, there's another layer that says, oh, you could benefit from this as well. Now, there may be some people who come to Celebrate Recovery for a season. They go through a step study, or they stick around for a little while and they apply that to their life and they're able to go out. I don't want to make it sound like once you start Celebrate Recovery, it's not the mafia. Once you're in, you're in for life. But there are a lot of us who feel like there are more and more issues we want to deal with, while some people might come in, deal with something, and take it somewhere else.
So let's break let's break the mirror for a minute. And okay. Is addiction spiritual warfare? Is it something we can look at and say it's the enemy? It's the enemy. It's the enemy. We always want to blame the enemy. The Flip Wilson, the devil made me do it. There's,
right.
I must be demon oppressed. There must be the alcohol demon has gotten me. The drug demon got me. The cocaine, the crack demon got me.
Right.
We have all the excuses, and we want to shift the burden to the dark side, if you will,
right.
Using your Star Wars poster. But is there any truth to that? And if there is truth to that, is it the preeminent truth, or is it just in a narrow space where we can look at that and look at deliverance as opposed to recovery?
Yeah, I think that there is some truth to it. I think that the enemy knows our weaknesses and he knows where to hit us. And, I think that there are a lot of people that are going to feel like they're being tempted by different things and they're going to act out with those different things. So I don't want to completely write that off as that there's no truth to it, because I believe that there is. But I also believe that my choice has a lot to do with that I can choose to do that and I can choose not to do that. And I think that that's why part of the recovery process is learning about myself and learning where my weaknesses are. So for instance, I know I'm at my weakness when it's dark outside and I'm alone. At nighttime and I'm alone is when I'm easy pickings for to make dumb mistakes, whether that's eat a whole bag of Oreos or look at something I shouldn't look at online or go down the laundry list of things, whatever that means. Those are times when I know I'm in danger. So yeah, I think that there's some truth to the fact that you're being tempted and you're being hunted. And if you're a believer, that Satan would love to weigh you down with some kind of addiction or something that keeps you from serving Jesus effectively, sure. But I also believe that there are choices I need to make every day. And it's why in my, when I talk about I'm somebody who chose to become an alcoholic himself. Nobody put a gun to my head and said, start drinking.
Right.
It was my decision to do those things. And so there's a little bit of both to that.
You talk in the book about keeping short accounts, and we you and I are in ministry, and this is just the TV branch of our ministry, which is a teaching ministry. This is just the media branch of that ministry. But I have a board, and I talk to that board all the time. These were the ones who carried me through the betrayal. They were that inner circle. They say if you can count on one hand, those people were really close. Jesus only had 12, and one of the 12 betrayed him. So statistically, short accounts and the right people to have those accounts with is extremely important. People to check on you and for you to check on them.
Right.
You talk about that as part of a life lesson in being able to keep short accounts. Is that short accounts with yourself? Is that short accounts with God? Is that short accounts with other people?
Yeah, yes. But I think specifically I'm talking about two things that we do in recovery, which is make amends and offer forgiveness, and doing that quickly. So one thing that ends up happening is it's really easy to build resentments against people in your life. And by offering, you talked about earlier, by offering them up and offering forgiveness to them and saying, hey, I'm not going to hold a grudge against you, but I'm going to let God deal with you, and I'm going to release you from that and forgive you for that. That's actually something that benefits us as believers, because we have to forgive other people, and Jesus commanded that we forgive others. But it also benefits us as people who, I don't want to carry around that stuff with me all the time and remind myself of what you've done to me over and over and over again. But that's a process. On the other side of things, making amends or saying I'm sorry when I blow it without an excuse, that's so hard, is to just say, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry I hurt you. I'm sorry I said that. I'm sorry I did that thing. I always want to justify myself when I hurt somebody. I'm sorry I did that, but here's why, or here's the situation that led up to it. But really, when somebody apologizes to me and they just say, Johnny, I'm sorry, without offering an excuse, it helps me so much. So the idea being that if you want relational change, short accounts is the way to go about it, where I blow it, I apologize. You blow it, I forgive you. It doesn't mean we don't deal with it. It doesn't mean that if you hurt me in some way that we don't have to reestablish trust, or we don't have to go to counseling or do something to help us to where you're not doing that thing that hurts me anymore, or whatever the situation is. But it just means that I'm not going to keep reminding you, hey, remember when you hurt me? Remember when you hurt me? Remember when you hurt me? But I'm going to forgive you from that so that God can do something in our relationship.
As we look at our relationship with God, is there anyone God can't forgive? Is there anyone that God doesn't love? Is there anyone who, yes, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God? You could take that as an indictment. You could take that as a really negative commentary and saying, well, I've fallen short of the glory of God, so he's not going to love me. But what is the real truth?
That's one of my favorite lessons in the book, is that there is no one that God doesn't love, won't forgive, and can't change. And the reason I love that is I have to remind myself of that lesson all the time. When I think about the ways I've blown it, when I think about the mistakes I've made, not just in the past with alcoholism, but today and yesterday, and just the things that happen, it's so tempting for me to think that I've been disqualified from God's love, or I'm not worthy of him. And even in the process of writing this book, that whole last lesson, I was sitting writing, going, who do you think you are to write this? What gives you the right to do this? And it was through those thoughts that God said, here's who you are. You're my kid. You're my child, and I love you, and I died for you. And here are all the things, here are all the reasons you can do this. And so for me, that's really, anybody who reads this book anybody who's listening to this or watching this, if somebody says, I'm not worthy of God's love, if they can get just that, great. That they are worthy of God's love and that Jesus loves them and cares about them so deeply, not just in I care about everybody, but I care about you specific way, that'll be worth every part of it to me. So no, I don't believe that there's anyone that God's love doesn't cover, and that there's no one that his forgiveness is anybody who's excluded from his forgiveness or his power to change.
When you first told Jenny of your calling to write this book and to go global with your stuff, what was her response?
Well, we've been doing this in Celebrate Recovery for a long time with some of our training conferences and some of the things that we've been doing. And just like her response to me when I had just gotten sober and said, I feel like I'm being called back into ministry, her response was, great, what's next? And that has been her response for a lot of the wild things that I felt like God has kind of called us along is, great, what's next? And so she does this ministry with me and is excited to be a part of it and to watch what God does, not just with my story, but with our story.
Well, it's an incredible testimony to the grace, to the mercy, to the unwavering, infallible, and unstoppable love of God for all of his people. And that there are people like yourselves out there that are willing to serve, to facilitate you, your father, the legacy of Celebrate Recovery. Rick Warren of Saddleback Church, who much maligned in the media for all kinds of different reasons. I know nothing about other than the fact that I live in a glass house too. And I read some of the comments on our videos and I go, yeah, I don't know who they're talking about.
Right.
I just have no idea who they're talking about. But there's been so much good, and millions upon millions of people are being blessed and benefiting by this, and families are being healed, people are being healed, and we serve a God of reconciliation, and we're called to a ministry of reconciliation, and that's what this is. Becoming reconciled to God, becoming reconciled to who he created you to be, so you can be reconciled with your fellow man. That salvation isn't the end-all experience, it's the beginning-all experience. It's the beginning of new life in you, and that's why we stay here. Once we accept Jesus, we're not sucked up into heaven, but we're stayed here because it's the horizontal that matters to God in that ministry of one anothering. And if you're struggling, then I want to encourage you, whether or not you're struggling with hurt feelings, whether or not you're manifesting behaviors like alcoholism or drug addiction or pornography or adultery or any issue that has to do with a wounded heart, Celebrate Recovery and this book, The Road to Freedom, Healing from Your Hurts, Hang-Ups, and Habits by Johnny Baker, is a resource book for you and for your family. Johnny Baker, thank you so much for sharing this story here with us on Revealing the Truth.
Thanks so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
God bless you, my friend. And that brings to an end our live broadcast day, but that doesn't mean we go off the air. We broadcast 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so that we're prime time in every time zone around the globe. You can find us at ignitinganation.com. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And tune in tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Central Standard Time, when we're back here in the studio in Birmingham, Alabama, bringing you the first segment, Revealing the Bible, and then 3 hours of Revealing the Truth. Until we see you back here tomorrow, we bid you shalom.